Be intentional. And what I mean by being intentional is to put that same planning into your personal life and activity that you do in business that we spend so much time training ourselves how to do. If you're lost personally, how are you going to figure out what you want to do professionally? If you're not sure what you want to do professionally, you're never going to be happy personally. So like those things are inextricably tied and they are 100% overlap with one another.
Brock Weatherup. 10 years ago, he sold his first company, Pet360.com, to PetSmart for $160 million. It took under 5 years to build. Since then, he's had 2 more successful exits, but 2 years ago, his journey took an unexpected turn when a life-changing medical diagnosis reshaped his entire outlook. In this episode, Brock talks about the secrets behind his exceptionally consistent entrepreneurial success, how he stays so driven and optimistic, and what gives him a sense of purpose. Hello, Brock.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
7 years ago, you sold your company in a very successful exit for $160 million. And how old were you at the time?
Gosh, I guess I was in my late 30s when that happened. So I think 37, 38, something like that.
Okay. How did you feel right after the exit?
I think, when you go through an event like that, it was a like every exit story, there's a huge amount of ups and downs that go along with it. Mm-hmm. I would describe myself as a very active people leader. Mm-hmm. I love to do what I do because I can build great teams and have great people and enjoy the collective, both ups and downs and successes and failures and opportunities and everything else, all that collectively together. And, to go through that roller coaster of building a company, getting it to the point of exit. And again, the exit was not happening and then it was happening. And so that went from this incredible potential success moment to a moment where, you feel like you're a total failure because that's when it went away. We were a bit, I'd say, out over our skis on once you get to the sale and you kind of out and it's an exciting and wonderful and great and everything, then you go through a pretty heavy bit of change management, both individually and personally, because all of a sudden you go from it being your company and this thing that you've built to handing it off to somebody else. And how do you bring what you have built into that and make that work? And that's a pretty heavy duty transition effort. Again, that's collectively for the organization as well as, kind of what one goes through individually.
So that first exit of yours was from the company called Pet360.com.
That's correct.
It took you 5 years to build, right?
Correct.
And then for 9 months, you stayed with PetSmart, the acquirer, to help in that transition. So you mentioned that it was a bit tricky for you to feel as an employee again after you owned the company. So can you elaborate on this a little bit?
We sold to PetSmart that had been talked about while we were going through the sale process, which created some complexities. And our acquisition process was an activist investor in the middle of our process with PetSmart had taken an interest in PetSmart. But once we were acquired, we were then a important equation in PetSmart's process, which was underway behind the scenes, unbeknownst to me and to our team, of taking PetSmart private. And so again, while there's a change in transition of having your company and now becoming part of a much, much, much larger organization, again, things that you learn, this is the first time you go through an exit, you learn a whole lot. What I didn't realize, something that, when we had gone through the negotiation of selling the company, we had a change of control thing that PetSmart tried to remove from some of the earnout dynamics. And, we were like, well, why would they be taking this out? Like we didn't know they were going to be taken private, or going through that process. Yeah. So we're like, well, no, of course the change of control is going to stay in there. And so what ended up happening was our team, and which was a sort of a wonderful double dip for our group, was that 9 months after we sold to PetSmart, our earnout things that were kind of 2-year, 4-year sort of things basically all vested because of the take private. So,
Great.
a whole, which kind of removed kind of the golden handcuffs, a whole bunch of other things, which then presented the opportunity of, okay, well, is this where I want to stay? And this is where I want to do. And I will say the transition to going private and going into large private equity and that sort of thing was not the most enjoyable experience, I will say. And so once that was completed, I decided to opt out and, suggest that there was, I didn't want to do that anymore.
So by that time, you've been in that business for 6 years, right?
Correct.
Just a few months after that final exit, after you left the acquirer, you bought another company in the same space, didn't you?
Correct.
Why? And how did it happen? And what were you thinking?
So we had known the group called PetCoach, so telemedicine for pets. We had actually at Pet360 pre the sale to PetSmart had made a kind of an agreement with this company called PetCoach, because one of the brands within our Pet360 world was PetMD, so a content site about kind of like WebMD for pets. And we had created this relationship with a couple great entrepreneurs and a small team that were coming out of a thing called Dream Adventures. And we basically made an investment in them, a small scale investment in PetCoach, because we wanted to bring telemedicine into our world. And we had our deal with them was they would come to us. We had basically an option at 12 months later to buy the company out. I felt the relationship there had a lot of very positive, complementary kind of skill sets, what they were very good at, to David and Fernando and myself. So I decided to kind of, basically invest and buy that business and try and figure out what we could do with it.
So how was the whole power dynamics?
Well, I think it'd be a good question to ask them, but I think the reality was, they were a younger company and they were younger entrepreneurs for me. And so hadn't had as many bruises, maybe that I had, or learnings. And, the type of, I'd like to say the type of leader that I am, and I think they would say the exact same thing, was, I came in and I brought skill sets that they didn't have, and they had skill sets that I didn't have. And it was a very mutually respectful kind of opportunity on how we would go about it. And I was able to help them become a more mature scaling business as they were incredible technical and product and strategy folks. And we just, end up being pretty fantastic. And I still do a bunch of things with them to this day. So we had then, and we still have now, a very, very positive relationship.
So what did you learn about yourself in the process? Because you were a 0 to 1 founder before, and now you were a scaler. Which hat felt more natural and comfortable for you?
I've always kind of described my sort of sweet spot and sort of what I've learned about myself is that my skill set is really what I'll call in the startup to grown up stage. So not the 0 to 1 stage. So PetCoach being a perfect example, like David and Fernando started that at 0. That part of it, I think I am a lot more, I create a lot more value in, feel a lot more comfortable in. And I'd say the foundational piece of that, and I've said it a few times, but great businesses are built because of people, and a little bit more about people, and then people a little bit more. And then you can get to strategy, pricing, and process, and everything else you want to go with it. But great people make a great business. I've seen endless examples of what I would describe as not really a great business or not really a great product being incredibly successful because they have an amazing team do it. And then you'd see something else that should be an amazing business or amazing product that is, oh, by the way, not successful because they didn't have a really good team.
So from that point on, you've been involved in many businesses. You had 2 exits after that point. Have you tried to build the business from scratch again? Or all of these businesses were already you scaling them or investing in them?
Well, so after we built PetCoach in that example, and then we sold that to Petco, and then I left that and started a new business at 0. And so great pet care that we built was 0 on the first day, and that was actually It was me kind of, I'd say, putting my money where my mouth is on believing in people. Like I wanted to work with people that I really liked working with, that I thought were incredibly talented, and go after an industry that we knew pretty well. And so we knew the pet industry. I knew, and the pet industry pretty well. And I then, kind of reached out to a small handful of people, most of whom had worked for me twice before, some who'd worked for me once before. And so day one for us was, seven of us. And I was lucky enough to be in a position to personally fund it. And, the reality was we didn't know what business we were building. It was just, okay, we got a smart group of people that are really capable and complementary with one another, and let's go build a business. So we then built what ended up being greatpetcare.com, which was a website, so an Amazon reseller business, a media business, content business, product business, a retail business that we had. Like all of these kind of, built together. And that came together in a very short period of time. And, because we had really, really talented people. 2 years in, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and that, created a moment in time where my ability to be the all-in leader that I like to be was challenged because of my personal health. And in the relationship with my team, and saying, hey, like what we're going to do, the right answer that we collectively agreed on as a team to balance all of that and put them in a good position for continuing their success, allowing me to step out of it, was to sell the business. And we were able to do that very successfully.
I imagine a diagnosis like this would completely change your priorities and motivations at that time.
Absolutely.
Could we talk about that? How it affected your thinking at that time and up to today?
Yeah, well, it was. Yeah, look, it's been a very interesting and complex journey since then. So, which is basically 3 years ago, actually. September 15th, which is a few days from now on the calendar, but September 15th, 3 years ago, was exactly when I was diagnosed. And, look, it was a wicked curveball out of left field, and, needed to learn what this, MS, neurological degenerative disease in your brain and spinal cord that doesn't have a cure. What is that going to do? And what do you do about that? And, the journey that it led it on, first and foremost, like was able to, go into it because I was, lucky enough to have an incredible partner in my life, and my wife, Mary, who was, incredible with me, and my family and friends there to kind of support through what this is and what that looks like. I knew I needed to kind of get out of the business because the intensity of being a startup entrepreneur and CEO, and if you're going to be the leader that I think is a great leader, like I want to be, like it requires an enormous amount of energy. And while stress isn't good for anybody, it's particularly bad for someone with a neurodegenerative disease like MS. And so, the right answer was for me to exit that. But, look, I was terrified the day that we closed selling Great Pet Care to Covetrus. Like, I was terrified, because all of a sudden, like, the thing that I'd built my personality on, or not personality, wrong word. I had built my identity on and had, spent the prior basically 25 years, perfecting things that I liked to do that I also found I was good at, which was being a startup growth CEO. I couldn't do it anymore. My body was not going to allow that to happen. And that's a very hard thing to take, as my wife described, as a forced midlife crisis. And so, kind of came into that. I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And part of the deal of selling the business to Covetrus was that I needed to be out. And so the day we closed, like my job was over, right? Like I didn't have a new boss. I didn't have anything else going on. My team was now gone. So nobody was reporting to me, and I wasn't reporting to anyone. So, which is a very, very different place to be. But, I needed to prioritize kind of how I was dealing and what I needed to do around my health, and kind of understand what that is. And then started on a journey from then till now. So that was 2.5-ish years ago. That kind of started this sort of further in that journey. And, I've I don't know, the way I've done businesses, and where you kind of A/B test things and you put things next to one another and see what works, and do more of the things that work and stop doing the things that don't. Like, I've been basically A/B testing life in some respects of like, okay, like what do I do? What do I like to do? Where do I find success with it? And, I get to do all of this in a very lucky place because I've been able to be financially successful and thus financially secure, which gives you a huge advantage in figuring this out. I found that I've been able to do some things in the classroom. So as a graduate at University of Colorado at Boulder, and been out to the Leeds School of Business there a number of times, and being able to go into those classrooms and talk with students and talk with the MBA fellows and things. Just, hey, how to do business and how to think about life and how to think about priorities and how to think about building their business. Like, that's really fun to me, and I love that sort of engagement, and I get an enormous amount of energy out of that. And oh, by the way, it works within my health, so I'm trying to facilitate more opportunities to do that. You got to figure out where your place is in what that looks like in life. And I had a very unique circumstance of something forced me to take a step back and look at things very differently in a very kind of unusually quick and unusually an unusually tense moment, an intense moment, because normally people do it when they started getting towards quote unquote retirement and they're figuring out their path at that point. Well, okay, I was kind of put into retirement-ish sort of things, but at 50 instead of at 65. And, I've got a lot more that I still want to do. And I have a lot of energy and I have a lot of enthusiasm. And I'd like to think I have a lot of experiences that are also highly valuable to other people and companies. And it's also what I like, a lot of purpose that I really like to engage in. And so I want to do more of that.
So I find it absolutely fascinating that you decided to continue working so actively and not taking a break. Is it because you were really wanted to have that sense of purpose and being helpful to others? Or what did you think motivate you most to do that?
Business is what I love. Yes, it's been my job, but more importantly, I love it. I just love it. I don't really have hobbies. I don't really have a situation where I don't tinker in the basement. I love reading the newspaper and learning about businesses and studying things and learning about stuff. And I just find business endlessly fascinating. And that doesn't change. And just because I physically can't put the same level of energy at the same level of intensity for the periods of time that it requires to be full time and all that, my brain, my heart, my soul, my passion, I love seeing people be successful. I love seeing businesses grow. I love people finding new paths to things. I love the dynamic of just watching success happen. And that sort of dynamic is very rewarding to me. And I wanted to do more of that. And it's not and again, this is a very privileged thing to be able to say, but it's not about making more money, though I would like to make more money. Of course, everybody would like to make more money, but honestly, I'm in a position where I'm able to hey, what do I really love to do? And what do I really love to engage with? And, that's where it is. At the same time, I'm not remotely working as hard as I used to. I'm not remotely engaged at a level like I used to. I mean, when you're startup CEO, it's 24/7, 365, and that puts pressure and challenges on your partners in your life, like my wife picking up a lot of that, or kind of things that I would like to do more of as a friend and as a father and as a husband and as a son to my parent. All these sorts of things are things that you want to do more of. And I can do that now. And I am doing that now. And I am taking the time so that my body doesn't break down in the way that it would if I stayed fully intense. And when I have the mindset of doing that, then I can be that much more valuable and that much more impactful to the companies that I'm engaged with.
So by removing stress from your life, you probably also removed quite a lot of adrenaline that was rewarding you for that stress. How did that feel, the transition into this quieter, slower life?
It's been fantastic. like, the reality is, like, I've talked about, MS kind of forced me off of the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pretty good thing, because I could, I don't know, it's kind of cliche-ish, right? But like, you can, like, it forces you to kind of stop and smell the roses and stop and look around a little bit more. And I think I think it's actually made me, when I have re-engaged in businesses and been involved with them, but I think I've actually been even that much more productive and that much more successful because I've had clarity. There aren't as many things because of my intensity and activity that I used to be. Like, I actually have more time to reflect. But I don't miss either at the same time. Like, it's fun to wake up in the morning, like I did this morning. Like, hey, what day of the week is it? Like, that's kind of a fun, like, because you're not on this sort of restriction, or not restriction, wrong. You're not on the structure of, oh yeah, like I've got this today and it's Tuesday and it's Monday and what's Saturday and Sunday. Like, yeah, kind of in a very different place. And it's a very lucky thing to have and enjoy. But I try and make sure that I really appreciate it. But I also know that, I don't know. I think I've been given some skills, and I think I've been given some tools, and I think I've given a lot of experiences, and I've earned and worked hard for a lot of those things. And, if and when people can find value in me sharing it with them, I'd like to be able to do that more and more.
So you mentioned a few things that I assume give you this sense of purpose. Your continuing involvement in businesses that you find meaningful. You teach. You spend time with the family. Anything else that you would say gives you a sense of purpose in life?
Well, I think it's kind of the how to live every day of just being, it sounds like a weird thing, but like, just be a good person. Like, just show up for your friends, be there for your family, like, help the little old lady across the street. Like, I don't know, just like, kind of just, do that and take the time to do it, because when you take the time to do it, you actually gain a whole lot more time to do a whole bunch of other things even better afterwards. It feels like you're taking time out to do something, when actually taking the time out to do something gives you weirdly more time, because you're just more focused, you're more effective, you're more engaged when you get back to, say, work things or things, and you're just that much more effective with it. But you got to give yourself the time to kind of balance, kind of between those two things. But that's the fun of being able to have time to step back and kind of, again, see the world for what it is, and be able to digest it without the intensity of input. And again, like, I just, again, I feel lucky to be able to do all of that. And, again, a lot of that is, having built what I would say, and I've invested in the team around me. And by the team, I mean my personal team, meaning my wife, my kids, my parents, my friends. Like, like, look, you've got to invest in those people, because they are the ones who are then there for you to help you on the way back and help you whenever you need them and wherever you want to kind of talk about it. Like, it's a great situation to be in.
So how did all that affect your thinking of whom you want to have around you?
So when I got diagnosed, and it was September, and there's a medicine that I'm on that's kind of at least kept it from getting worse, and it's via infusion, so they literally put it straight into your vein, and it's terrifying. The first half of the first infusion was 7 days before my 50th birthday, and the second half of that medication was going to happen a week after my 50th birthday. So a 50th birthday is a big birthday in somebody's life, right? So I was turning 50. I had been diagnosed with MS basically, what was 6 weeks prior. And so I called, there's a group of friends, a group of buddies of mine, that there's a group of 6 of them that are some very close friends and have been for a long time. That's when I told them I had MS. It's the first time I'd kind of shared with anybody outside of my direct family that this is what it was. And I wanted them to know, because I had great fear. I was like, if something happens to me, these are people that I want to make sure are around to be supportive of my wife and my kids, which sounds like a crazy thing. And I told them that, and they were as you'd expect of being amazing, incredible men and friends, they said, okay, and then 2 weeks later, they surprised me by flying to San Diego to surprise me for my 50th birthday. So this is, again, 10 days after I told them, and they were coming for, I think, 3 were coming from Toronto, 1 was coming from Philadelphia, 1 was coming from Spokane, Washington, and this was, COVID-ish sort of period towards the middle end of it, but they had to get through borders and there was all sorts of things to make that really difficult to do. And yet, they showed up for me. My team showed up. It made what was a horrible, horrible day happening to be something incredibly spectacular. That didn't happen that day. That happened because the prior 10, 15 years, we'd put time into one another as friends, and we'd been around one another, and we'd been committed to one another, and we'd done things for one another. And then somebody in the group, in that case, me, had a difficult moment. And guess what? My team showed up.
I'm sure it was absolutely incredible for you.
It was amazing. Amazing.
So, Brock, can we go back to that moment when you just started your first business and trace the evolution of your motivation from that moment to today? So what was the reason for you to start your first business?
Well, the first business I failed, I personally did. I thought the business was good, but we built a company called Fathead, which was in the sports memorabilia so kind of large wall graphics of your favorite sports stars. If you're a huge fan of LeBron James, do you want to, basically a poster of a life-size LeBron James on your wall, and that business, and that was, my desire, my interest in getting into something where it was, I'm a big fan of sports, and it was kind of a fun thing to go in, and this seemed like a really unique opportunity and a lot of fun, something I was excited about, and combination of circumstances allowed me to say, okay, let's create this and be a part of the initial stages of that business and really grow it. And I feel incredibly proud about the brand that we built there that still lives today. And this is from 20 years ago. And the reality is, at the end of the day, I got fired from that job. Now, part of it, I pushed myself to get fired. There were a lot of issues between me and the capital that was behind the business, things I learned. You learn in your first business a whole lot of things about okay, what does the cap table look like? Who is actually, the decision maker? Who can, make the decision that you need? And I didn't have any capital, so I needed other people's capital, which meant I did not have control, which meant I was responsible to somebody else. And, and at the end of the day, the investors in that business, I found to not particularly like and not believe that they had the best morals and ethics as a core of them, which is where I then fought for a few different things. And it's a long story for another day, but I forced a situation that at the end of the day, yes, got me fired, but I thought it was for all of the right reasons. But so I went from something where I put a whole lot of my personal money on a percentage wise, probably 50% of my personal capital, accessible capital, into the business, and I lost all of it. Got nothing for it, and it was a disaster. At the same time, it was one of the great motivators to what's kind of created the next business, and the next business after that, and the next business after that. So, this terrible failure in some respects, and oh, by the way, that all happened. It was February of 2009. So if you remember, March of 2009 was the bottom of the market, and kind of one of the worst times in our lifetime in kind of my cohort age group. And I was a fired CEO of a startup business looking for a job in the worst economy that's been in my lifetime. Okay, great time to be looking for a job, but
so that created a motivation for you to succeed. That's what you mean, that the failure was useful?
And anytime, we fortunately learn more from our failures than our successes. Kind of it's because they jar a little bit more and they scar a little bit deeper. But the outcome of it again was okay, all the things I needed to know about how do you structure it? How do you create great teams? How do you create, great motivation? How do you align incentives? How do you put all of those things together? And, the reality is, all of those things came together. Who are your investors? Not just that they are able to write checks, but who are they to you? Who are they as people? How do they operate in business? Are you doing the right sort of background checks on them? They do it on you, or you do it on them. And your versus like, hey, it's great that you're writing a $5 million check, but okay. And it's all wonderful when things are great, but when things get challenged, that's when generally people's true colors show up. And, folks who aren't good people will show up as aren't good people when the things are difficult. And that's what happened to me.
How important the financial motivation was for you early on?
I've been lucky enough. My first job, which was my first kind of real big job, was kind of working for what has become Interactive Corp. So the early days of Ticketmaster Online City Search is 99, 2000. And, I did okay. I had a good salary, was able to save. I've always lived well within my means. And so I kind of always had kind of enough. I'm not saying money wasn't a motivation, but like, I wanted to build something. I wanted to create something. I wanted to and have fun doing it. And I believed that money would be an outcome of that, but not the why of doing it. I'm sure I could have put more money in my bank account if I was, I'd say, more selfish and more greedy and those sorts of things. But I conversely believed it was really important to share equity across people who were doing things because it created a more ownership mentality. And I believe that's why we created success in the way that we did, was because the people who joined my teams earned by and were collectively motivated to create an outcome together versus, hey, Brock owns, this business and we're going to make him wealthy. Like that feels like such a horrible motivation. I've tried to live my life that if today happened to me my last day, that I would go happy and like don't leave regrets, but just have fun doing it and have a great time with it, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. But let's just let's do it right today, and let's see where it goes. And I've been lucky enough that has continued to work for me and continued to kind of fill me with rewards on many facets.
So all the three businesses that you sold had partners in them, correct?
Correct.
For this very reason that you described.
It was interesting. I had this sort of dramatic experience where when we sold PetCoach to Petco, and then I learned a lot from my experience at PetSmart and the senior team and what to do there. So I thought I had a playbook on how to be better inside Petco. And the reality was it was fascinating to kind of get in there. And I really struggled the first 6 months there. And I think one of the biggest reasons why I struggled there was I was operating as an owner in Petco, not as an employee of Petco. And that sounds like a small difference, but like I was sitting in our board meetings. And again, like I was one of the top couple people in this, multi-billion-dollar organization. And like, if you're in a corporation and you've grown up in a corporation and that's where you've built your career, power and value and all the things of kind of like how important are you are predicated on what is your head count, what's your budget size, and what's your title. Okay, those are and three things as an owner are irrelevant. As an employee are everything. And so we'd sit in our board meetings, especially early, and it would be like, I'd be sitting there, Rebecca over there, she needs, more people, and John needs more capital. And I'm like, well, I've got some extra head count and I've got some extra things. And I think the best thing for our business is John should get more capital and Rebecca should get more people because that's where the opportunities are. And I would do that and would be okay with that. And like, I got these sort of looks from them being like, okay, what's your angle? What are you trying to get done? Are you trying to become CEO? Are you trying to step over me? Are you trying to, because that's what somebody who was used to working in a corporate sort of scenario and was a career employee would never do unless there was a subtext, that there was some other reason for it. And I just wanted to be successful because when we had sold the company, I took a big chunk of what we sold in equity in PetCo. And so I was an owner. And that dynamic was really hard and took me a while to see. And finally did 5-6 months in that, like, oh, okay, like I got to figure out how to approach this differently, because I was not being as successful as I should have been because I was not operating in the way everybody else was thinking about it.
Fascinating. I really like this distinction between a founder mentality and an employee mentality. I can absolutely see that. So your only failure in business was that first business, or did you have other failed businesses later on?
Well, to say that that's my only failure is a absolute gross understatement of what happens actually, right? So within all of those are massive failures in all sorts of things in all sorts of different ways. Like fathead at the end of the day, I would say I get more accolades, more follow-up, more excitement, more credit for building Fathead than I do any of my other businesses.
Oh, wow.
And yet it's the one that was financially a disaster for me. It's where I got fired from, but it was a great brand. It has a lot of following and people are excited about it. Yeah. And so my failure is what most people remember that I did, not because it was a failure, but because they like the brand and the company. Yeah. But underneath that, within every one of those businesses are lots and lots and lots and lots of failures. But, one of the things that I always made foundational within my teams and with everyone that I would talk to was like, we didn't actively pursue failing, but we celebrated failure, because if you didn't celebrate failure and you weren't open and honest about failure, then people were scared to fail, and people didn't try as hard as they should, and people didn't discuss problems as openly as they should. When we wanted to tackle the next challenging things, I always had volunteers. It was always like, I want to go do that. I want to go. And guess what? People were willing to take that risk, because if you took a risk and went after it really well, worked really hard with it, executed it exceptionally, you would end up in a position where, okay, you know what? Like, I want to do this and we're going to go figure it out. And we would find more successful things because you tried more things and you tried things that were a little bit riskier, but you put more effort into it, and it just created this positive cycle of trying and failing and growing and trying and failing and growing and being okay with all of that and celebrating all that. And, I think that's foundational to what is. And so the failure is not a failure. Failure is a great opportunity to learn and move on and figure out the next thing.
I think it's so absolutely brilliant. It's kind of counterintuitive to so proactively celebrate failure, not just embrace it, but celebrate it. But I can absolutely see how it would have a very positive long-term effect on the team.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. You celebrate the successes also, right? But it's easy for everyone to celebrate and see the successes. But the successes don't happen if you're not making a whole bunch of failures along the way to that success, because otherwise the success is not going to be as grand as what it can be because you didn't try hard enough along the way. So you got to find that balance all the way through to create that outcome at the end of the day.
Well, lots of us forget to celebrate successes too. I actually talked to someone yesterday who said their biggest regret in their whole long career of building businesses was not celebrating every small occasion they could. And they look back and there is not much of that joy in their memory, which I found very interesting.
My wife has described with me as relentlessly optimistic, and that hasn't necessarily been the most positive thing sometimes, but the reality is, like we can wallow in what went wrong, and I would get very upset and not be in a good place if we repeated a mistake again. That absolutely intolerable. You cannot let that happen. Doing the same thing wrong twice, that's not okay. Doing it wrong once, learning and doing something different next time, great. Like, do that every day, do that all the time, make that part of what your DNA is, and, kind of keep having fun with it and bring energy to it, and, keep figuring it out. Like, that can be a lot of fun. But no, I think I've been able to have a lot of fun along the way. It's been really hard and really difficult, and you have to put a huge amount of effort into it. But, it's still, at the end of the day, my whole thing was like, okay, like, I'm selling a giant image of LeBron James on my wall, or I'm selling dog food or a leash. Like, with all due respect, like nobody's dying on our watch because of this. Like, it's just not that.
Yeah.
Like, let's not take ourselves that seriously. We're building businesses.
So, okay, you were talking about a failure for very rational business reasons. The business model was not good enough. How about failures when you didn't manage yourself or your personality well enough, and that resulted in a business failure?
Yeah, well, I think a little bit my example. So, kind of go back to it. The first 6 months of my time at PetCo, and I was, and the owner thing versus the employee thing. It doesn't mean that being an owner mentality is better than a employee mentality. It was total and complete obliviousness and being completely unaware by me of not spending the time to learn and see and understand. I thought I came in as this founder who had sold his businesses and was so smart and all these. So I knew all these on how to do it and where to go and what to do. The reality was I knew a lot for sure, but I didn't spend the time to see what was actually going on and learn how it had worked so that I could then take the right steps of moving it maybe some direction that I thought it should go. Instead, I was like, yeah, we should go here. And everybody else is like, well, I'm not going there. Versus I should have spent the time, especially early, to be like, okay, like spend a lot more time learning and frankly, a lot less time talking and a lot more time listening early on in that process to be like, okay, like I'm the newbie in here who doesn't know anything versus I came in being like, and part of it, I was brought in, the CEO wanted me to be a change agent, wanted me to be all these things, that I was excited to do. And so I was like, well, yay, I'm coming in. The CEO says I'm going to be a change agent. I'm the innovation guy. I'm changing this place and I'm going to make 30,000 people operate differently in a week. Like it just doesn't happen that way. And, kind of I think my blindness of being able to see that I had a massive gap of both knowledge, skill, and awareness to didn't allow me to get there. I eventually caught up to that, but it should have taken weeks, not 6 months, to figure that out. And those sorts of things, I think those are kind of growth things as a leader that I could point to 50 of them along the way of just, okay, tried, didn't need to. And you just got to build a lot more of your capacity and capability and just be more aware. And, I've learned over time to just be like, to just, have an insatiable appetite to learn and don't let that cloud that you actually don't know very much. You know a lot, everyone knows a lot, but you also got to like show up to everything. Like, I don't know what this is. I might have experience of what this looks like in somewhere else, but I've never been to this moment. This moment right now has never happened before. Okay. We can't say it has because it hasn't, because today is a new day. It was not yesterday, and we don't know what tomorrow is going to be. We can try and optimize for tomorrow, but you gotta stay learning and stay aware. And that I had to get caught up in and kind of, had me stumbling and falling on my face in a pretty bad way right out of the gate, being able to do that.
So it sounds like a lesson in humility.
Especially when you're succeeding, right? And I'd had a lot of success prior to that point, like you're getting promotions and you're getting raises and you're starting new companies and people are joining you and people make you feel good and you're raising capital and then you sell a business and then you start another one. And like, it's easy to tell your really positive story about how great you are, right? Because there's also a lot of people telling you that, which is really nice. And it feels really good. Yeah. And, in many ways, I think I am pretty good. But I also have a huge amount of things I'm not very good at. And I got to figure out how to always manage that. And it's hard to find that sort of balance between those two things. And that's where, again, you need the great people around you to, again, help you continue to be great at what you're good at and hopefully minimize your weaknesses. Like I always talk about people like, look, you can't make your weaknesses your strengths. A lot of people try and kind of go through, well, I'm not good at this, so I'm going to make that my strength. I'm like, don't do that. You're never going to take your weakness and make it a strength. You just can't. Now, can you make your weakness a neutral so that it doesn't hold you back? You bet. right? And how do you stay aware of what are your pluses and how do you do more of those? Amplify your pluses, because you can do that, but you can't take your minuses and make them pluses. You can make them neutral, right? Or make them as least impactful as possible. But okay, you got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, that requires quite a lot of introspection and the critical looking at yourself to understand what you're good at. You know, Steve Jobs talked about it quite a bit, about this overconfidence we have when we succeeded in building a product. And then next time we just assume it's going to succeed automatically. And what I see a lot in the post-exit community is that when that is fueled by money after a liquidity event, it can become very dangerous very fast, and people get burned very quickly. And then it's a long way to climb out of that situation.
I would agree 100%, because the reality is, well, again, I think I learned a lot by some success and a whole lot of failures in all that time to when I created my last business in great pet care. You know, the thing that I was incredibly proud about was I was like, okay, like I've learned all this stuff. What can I do? And the reality was like, okay, you need a really talented group of people that, oh, by the way, are not like me. Meaning, so when we got our initial team together, like there's a thing called Enneagram, which is a sort of personal kind of like your style sort of thing. I think it's a great test that helps people be very introspective and knowing what they are. Like I made everybody in our team take the Enneagram so that we could work better on day one. And I was really, really proud that of the 7 of us, there's 9 types of Enneagrams. Out of the 7 of us, there was 1 overlapping type. Like everybody had a very different style and personality about how they thought, what was their, like what they, and that made me feel really, really proud because, and that to me was a lot of lessons learned over time that you have to have and diversity gets kind of overused in many, but different diversity of perspective coming into it. And there's a lot of things about background, a lot of things about, kind of culture, a lot of things, that all kind of lead into what, but diversity of thought and perspective and dynamics, right, come to the same. That's how you create great outcomes, because you have different ways that people are trying to attack the same problem. We're going to try and create and do this. Well, this requires, I have my thought about what that is, and I can guarantee you it's not right. There's a lot of elements to the way I think it should happen that are probably are right and will make it successful, but they're not all of the reasons why, because I need 5 other perspectives to say, no, we got to do this, this, this. And then you end up with a great outcome. And again, when you look at what the next thing would be, it's going to dramatically be different because it requires another iteration of what it is. And look, people who fill their bank accounts and put things, kind of this, all, people think money is the reason why it is a demonstration of why they are successful. And the reality is like, okay, maybe you were, maybe you weren't, but there's, God knows there's, you have to work really, really hard to get lucky, but you also have to get lucky. Yeah. And people think, well, I just worked hard and I'm so smart and that's why I was successful. Well, you know what? No, you just happen to be working really hard and being successful, and it fit the moment in time in life where that was valued. Because if you had done it 5 years prior, 5 years later, you would have missed the boat, right? Doesn't mean anything else. And I think people don't have people around them to say, hey, ego, check it at the door because you're getting way too inflated for what you actually are. And, on the other hand, like, how do you kind of fulfill what those things are? And I think that's especially true, with youth, right? And we were all that way when we were young because we didn't know enough. And so we thought we were, look, everybody's invincible when they're 25, right? Like you can do anything. You can go anywhere, nothing's going to hurt you. Like you're going to, you know everything. Yeah. And you don't, a lot, and you have a whole lot of value and unique value of energy. You have unique value of not being encumbered by experience. So you think more broadly and more clear because you don't have things that have taught you not to do this and not to do that, which older people need to recognize. Just because you've learned not to do this and not to do that, that does not mean that you shouldn't try it again in a different way. And so that's the balance of the sort of thing. But there's a lot of youth that would say, I know everything and the old people are dumb. Okay, well,
Yeah.
part of that's true because there's experience that holds you back. On the other hand, like if you're old, doesn't mean that young people are dumb and naive either. It just, you gotta, like, what are the strengths of each of those dynamics and allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But, people can get out ahead of themselves and think that they are much more capable and much smarter and far more of an expert because something happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is it's just not.
So we talked about the importance of having a good incentive system and sharing equity with your partners. We talked about humility lessons and understanding your strengths and weaknesses. Anything else you think is very important to avoid a failure after success?
Well, I think you said it, and just going a little deeper into it is to just not have the belief, or more importantly, not think it's just true because you did it before this way, that will work today, because the market has changed, the people have changed, the execution of it is different. Like you have to stay in the, I got to keep learning. Now, are there dynamics around what I would put in the leadership category that are repeatable? Absolutely. Right. That you can get better, and being a leader of people, and how do you build culture and those sorts of things, like the fundamentals of how you do that, you can definitely build and get better and better and better and do more of that. But you also have to be very aware that the situation is different, and you got to optimize to the situation, even though you may start with a set of rules that you think are how you're going to solve it. The odds of it being how you're going to solve it are likely not true. But there's going to be a version of that if you edit and, rough around the edges and do some things, it'll probably be at the core similar, but that's not going to get you great success. That's going to get you out of the gate. But to create great success, you got to take whatever you've learned, refine it, learn, test, improve, make it something better, different, that works for that moment that's different than the prior moment. And that gap of perspective, I don't know if I put it really necessarily as humility or any sort of it's just just learn, because you're what was it? Your future investment results will not be the same as what they were, whatever the sort of caveat that everyone else, which is just true, right? Just because it happened before doesn't mean it will happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so how do you make sure that you continue to stay learning, continue to stay active, continue to stay in this sort of progressive, figure it out sort of mentality, because that's how you'll find a way to get from here to there.
Yeah, it's like the stock market. Past performance doesn't guarantee future success.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Not at all. So you also stayed in the same industry. You kept the same team, which I assume were fantastic risk management tools, whether intentional for that purpose or not. Do you think, looking back, that was part of your continuing success?
Look, I absolutely know that my success is because of the people that I've had around me and been lucky enough to, both be with me and then come work with me again. And kind of that, that builds, many. So going back to the Petco example, the first 6 months, what I did not understand, but one of the things that I did do in that first 6 months that did pay off really well was I recruited a whole lot of people into Petco. And by recruiting them, and oh, by the way, they weren't necessarily working for me. It was like, okay, I helped recruit somebody into the business strategy team and somebody into the tech team and somebody in the merchandising team, and helping them. But they were people who understood me, my language, even though I was not being particularly capable at articulating what I felt I needed to. If they were in their groups and I was talking they would help translate what I was saying ineffectively into their groups in the way that worked for their groups. And that was really helpful to what it is. And again, just, the people dynamics of that, is absolutely where the, success dynamics were for me. And I would say it still happens to today. When I'm working with a company or on a board, like we need to find somebody, I'm like, okay, I'm going to call somebody who's going to find somebody. And that feels, and and you can get amazing people to do amazing things in that sort of dynamic, which is just a very, very special thing when it works and people are willing to do that. And that's a two-way street, right? Somebody doesn't come work for you again because it was a crappy first experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody goes, oh, I hated working for that guy, but I'm going to go do it again. Says no one ever, right? But
Exactly.
but if somebody does that, and it gets them up to speed much quicker. Like again, when we built Great Pet Care and I brought that team together because everybody had worked for me before, like the how and why and the words I used, the style that I was already given. Like our ability to have a quote unquote culture on day one was instantaneous because we'd done it. Now we made a new culture, but the foundational elements of it of like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we know how Brock leads and we know what he expects and we know what we do and we know when we say this is what it means. And that just got us going much faster, much quicker than we would have in any other scenario if everybody was new. And so how do you kind of keep building that?
But I think you got very lucky there as well, because you could actually have the same team. Because more often than not, you would have to restrict your hiring attempts.
One of the guys that was in the last sentence, his name was Nick Rosenthal, like he hadn't worked for me in a pet company. He worked for a company that I was an advisor to that I had worked for that was totally outside of the pet industry, but I had gotten to know him and he had gotten to know me. I'd tried to hire him a couple times before, but I was unsuccessful for what was ever going on in life, in his life, our life, whatever else. And this time it worked out and it was an unbelievable hire. Another guy who I had worked with at Ticketmaster 15, 20 years prior, who I'd stayed in touch with, was impressed with him then. We'd stayed in touch and been like, okay, well, that was another person. Like those happen because you just see them over time. It's not because they were pet industry experts. They were really talented people who were doing lots of things that I just stayed aware of as they did their things in life. It's the beautiful thing about LinkedIn. It's a beautiful thing about social media if you pay attention to it in the right way. And I needed talents in these sorts of things. And it was like, oh, fantastic. Like the one guy was at Ticketmaster. I brought him into PetCo. And he had gone from Ticketmaster and then he'd gone to Nike and had done a bunch of, he'd been insanely successful, but he knew how to operate in a large corporation. So going back to my challenges at PetCo, I brought him in. His name was Bob Bennett. And he was every reason why I had almost any success inside PetCo, because he knew how to translate. He jokingly said, we'd go into a meeting to talk about something. I would break everything and I would, get us going the direction we needed to go. But I would leave a train wreck. I'd leave a mess because I didn't know how to get the corporate culture behind that. And then Bob would come in next to me as my right hand and would organize everybody behind me after I left a mess, because he knew how to get everyone organized, put it together, create an outcome, and create something fantastic. And we worked really, really, really well together because I had a skill he didn't have, and he had a skill that I didn't have. And the two of them together worked incredibly well.
Yeah.
But, you got to find those people. So it's not necessarily inside the industry. Yeah. It's just more of who are skill sets in that you pay attention to and you follow over time.
So Brock, in your second company, you brought investors in right away. You raised $2 million in seed financing. Do you think that was a good idea? Why did you decide to do that?
Well, what people don't really understand, right, is the value of the cap table, right, of what you have, right. I personally made more money selling a company for $30 million than I did selling a company for $200 million. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it depends what the cap table looks like. It depends whether things like preference stacks and other things that people learn along the way that are just you just don't understand on the first time around. And you're like, oh yeah, well, oh great, thanks for the $10 million check. And oh, you mean it's got a 2 times pref and a this and a guarantee that? And you're like, all of a sudden when you get to the outcome, you're like, well, wait a second, why did this all happen? And you just learn. You learn to figure that out. Look, there are important things to bring in. To bring in money, because money can be helpful, mostly because who is bringing in the money, not necessarily even the money. Mm-hmm. So when I was in kind of later companies, the money that I brought in was helpful, knowledgeable money that brought a person, brought a company, brought an experience, brought a connection, brought a customer into the conversation versus just the money. First company, I was like, I needed money. I just wanted money. I needed, and that was a mistake. Well, I should say that's the wrong way. It worked for what it was at the time. I could have been much smarter about it if I knew what I know now and gone back and done that. And look, and the reality is like, you put things together and how you manage what's going on in your life and how you are thinking about your investments, where you are with your family, where you are in your personal finance, that balances your risk profile, right? I mean, there's a reason why people who are younger start businesses more frequently. I'll call it their family burn rate is very low, right? If you're 23 years old and you're sharing an apartment in St. Louis, Missouri, like your burn rate is very low, right? You don't need a lot of income to stay alive, right? If you're living in New York City and you have 2 kids and you're married, like your burn rate is dramatically higher. You need to earn a certain amount on any given year to not go into the red, right? And so those are the dynamics that also then affect how much you personally invest into the next thing.
So Brock, is there anything else you feel would be helpful to know for someone who recently exited and is thinking of doing what you did, which is building the next business and maybe more businesses again and again?
Be intentional. And what I mean by being intentional is like we put all this planning into our businesses about where do you allocate capital? Where do you allocate time? Where do you allocate resources? What's the market you're going after? What do you want? How do you measure what that success looks like? But we don't do much of that into our personal lives, right? And so for somebody like, especially in times of big transition, like after an exit or anything else, like sit down and spend the time and you got to write it down and you got to share it with somebody that's important to you that will hold you accountable to it. But like, what are your intentions for you as a person? In my case, what is it for me as an individual? What is it for me as a husband? What is it for me as a father? What is it for me as a son? Right? Like, what do those things look like? And you have to put the same discipline that you put into your business. Like, okay, like me as an individual, like it's not like get in better shape, right? Okay, that's a goal that you would never accept in business, right? Like make more money. Like you'd be like, that's a worst goal on the planet for the business. Yes, that's what we're trying to do, but no, like how exactly are you going to do that? What are I'm going to do it this way. And so, okay, if that means, okay, well, you're going to get, an hour's worth of cardio exercise 4 times a week. Okay, great. If you think that's reasonable and make sure the person you're sharing it with is going to go, yeah, great, Brock, but not a chance you're going to do it that often. That's not how life is working for you. Okay, fine. But like, how do you put in what those things are? If volunteering is important to you, that, okay, like, okay, yeah, we all want to volunteer once a week, but it's probably not going to happen once a week. But okay, maybe make it once a month, right? And okay, where are you going to do that? Who are you going to want to do with it? What volunteering are you excited about? Like just be specific about what you want to do in life, right? And be intentional about it. And if you create that on a sheet of paper and actually write it down and have to present it to somebody, whether it's a parent, a spouse, a good friend, but like share it written down, you will be so much more focused about what that is. And it will help you then define, does this next startup or this next thing I'm going to do fulfill against those goals that I am setting out that are important to me in this basket of intentions? And it gives you a way to measure whether what you're choosing to go do fulfills where you want to go and what you want to do or doesn't. And look, and it's fine if the answer is like, I want to make a lot of money. There's nothing wrong with that being an intention, but what does that mean? And when does a lot mean a lot? And what does that look like? And what are you aiming to do? What are you going to take a risk to try and create $1 billion company? Or are you really happy making $10 million? Okay, like, or maybe $1 million, whatever it is. But like, what are those sorts of things? And how do you get intentional about it? So I just would always encourage folks to do this just in life, and whether you do it every year or do it during kind of every couple of years or whenever you have big moments where you're thinking about what should I or where do I want to go? Where do I want to move? What does that look like? I mean, spending that time to be that sort of intentional, like I did it right after I got diagnosed with MS. We've done it as we became empty nesters as a couple, like what is our intentions? Okay, well, guess what? We were living in San Diego. We now live in Connecticut because we made the choice to be intentional. One of the things on our intentions as a couple was being closer to family. And our family's more on the East Coast, the Northeast, than it is in Southern California, as much as we love living in San Diego. But we made that choice because that was in our intentions, and we were able to say, this is what we wanted to go do. And that's what we're doing. And now we feel better about it. So like getting in, spending the time to put that same planning into your personal life and activity that you do in business that we spend so much time training ourselves how to do.
Would you say that being intentional in your personal life also increases the chances of your success in business?
100%. There is 100% correlation between those two things. Because if you're lost personally, how are you going to figure out what you want to do professionally? If you're not sure what you want to do professionally, you're never going to be happy personally. So like those things are inextricably tied, and they are 100% overlap with one another.
Yeah. You know what I see a lot in the community of exited founders is people jump straight into a new business in a way to escape dealing with personal issues that are triggered by success.
Very likely.
And then I see this pattern. Then a few years later, businesses failed because there were all these personal issues that were not properly addressed. How did you avoid that?
Well, I think on a personal level, I've just always, I found an incredible partner on the personal side of my wife. And I think B, we've always been very, we have a very open dialogue, and it goes back to a little bit of, again, what came first, the celebrating failures in business. I don't know if that became before or after how to work on a successful relationship, which has successes and failures, right? If you're not actively talking about why is it working in a relationship, then you're not going to improve what you have in a relationship. Much like if you're not talking about what isn't working in business, you're not going to improve what's happening in business. And so again, I don't know if I'm going to be totally honest with you what came first, but it was always a part of things in my personal life and in my professional life. We just always talked about whatever was going on. The hard stuff went on the table first, right? You don't talk about the easy stuff on the table first. You talk about the hard stuff. And if you work through that, then the easy stuff is easier, and you solve the things that really matter, which is the hard stuff. And so, again, whether that's your personal life or your professional life, I think it's critical that you bring those two things together, and thus one allows you to be happier. I mean, look, there are people who found great success in their business who are just, I would put in the unhappy category. And that's unfortunate, like the same sort of thing, because they have not spent the time to be happy in their personal life, and vice versa. Right. And so you got to find that balance between those two, because they are completely and inextricably tied. So
how do you want to be remembered?
A person who cared about other people and backed up what he said.
I so much enjoyed our conversation. I could continue for hours.
That was great.
But I know I need to.
Yeah, I think we could go for a bit longer. This was fantastic and enjoyable.